Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. It always amazes me to see how people from every corner of the world can sit with me in moments like this, where I open up, not as an idol, not as a performer, but as a human being carrying stories inside my heart. I want to take you back to a night that seemed ordinary on the surface, but it has never left me. A night when a simple question asked not to me, but to Jimin pierced through the layers of image, success, and fame, and cut into the most vulnerable place in my heart. The question was, who do you think is Jungkook's soulmate? And I was not prepared for the weight of that moment. I had spent years believing that I could carry everything inside me without breaking. I had trained myself to endure long rehearsals, to perform even with injuries, to smile when exhaustion burned in my chest. I thought the same armor would protect me when it came to matters of the heart. But that night, when Jimin was asked about my soulmate, the ground beneath me shifted. The story didn't begin there though. It began with the life I had been living in the shadows of my own achievements. Every day felt like a battle against time. Studio sessions, recordings, interviews, fan meets, stage rehearsals, everything was measured by progress and perfection. And just like the glass walls in our practice rooms, my own soul often felt transparent but unseen. People saw the surface, the stage lights, the sweat, the power in the dance, but they didn't always see what it cost or what it covered. I became efficient, almost like a machine. Each conversation with staff was timed. Each hour was evaluated based on how much I accomplished. Even friendships sometimes became checkpoints. How are they helping me stay focused? How are they part of my journey forward? Without realizing it, I had begun to measure even love and connection by their utility. And Jimin, my brother, my friend, the one who always stood beside me, noticed it before I did. It was during one of those late nights after practice when the room was empty except for a few of us. Cameras off, lights dim, just silence, and the sound of my own heartbeat calming down after hours of singing and dancing. Jimin sat across from me, not saying much. He didn't need to. His silence always said enough. But that night, there were others in the room, producers, interviewers, people who were curious in a way that sometimes made me uncomfortable. The question came casually, almost like a joke. Jimin, you've known Jungkook for so long. Who do you think is his true soulmate? They laughed after asking it, expecting a playful answer, a light-hearted joke. But for me, the words struck like lightning. I froze, my breath caught, my chest tightened. Because for years, I had carefully avoided that word soulmate. It felt too heavy, too exposing. I glanced at Jimin, trying to read his expression before he even opened his mouth. Would he laugh it off? Would he dodge the question? Would he say something vague? But no, he paused. And in that pause, I felt every unsaid word, every memory, every scar, every moment of closeness that we had shared. He looked down for a moment, as if searching for an answer that wasn't rehearsed. And in that silence, I broke down inside. Not outwardly, my face stayed calm, my body still, but inside me, walls cracked. Because the truth is, I had been carrying questions of my own. What if I never find someone who sees me beyond the idol? What if I never experience love that isn't weighed down by fame, by cameras, by expectations? What if I've already met my soulmate, but I was too busy chasing perfection to notice? I thought of Joseph, the man Elon Musk once spoke about in his own story. Though mine was different. My Joseph wasn't a janitor in a glass building. My Joseph was Jimin himself, the one who, through quiet presence, showed me what I had been missing while I was sprinting through life. He had always been there, reminding me in subtle ways that life isn't about how much you achieve, but how much of yourself you give, how much you are present for the people who matter. When Jimin finally spoke, he didn't answer with a name. He said something that cut even deeper. A soulmate is not always about romance. It's about who makes you feel at home, even when the world feels heavy. Jungkook's soulmate is whoever reminds him that he doesn't have to carry everything alone. The room grew silent. People nodded. Some smiled politely. But for me, it was not polite at all. It was piercing truth. Because I realized that I had been trying to prove my worth by achievements, by records, by perfection. I thought my soulmate would be someone who admired me for all of that. But Jimin's words reminded me, the real soulmate is someone who sees me, when the cameras turn off, when the noise fades, when the perfection crumbles. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed his words over and over again. Was he hinting at something? Was he describing himself without meaning to? Or was he simply speaking wisdom he had earned through his own struggles, his own heartbreaks? The irony was unbearable. I had spent so long afraid of the question, "Who is your soulmate?" that when it was finally asked, it wasn't even directed at me, it was directed at Jimin. And yet, it broke me more than if they had asked me directly. Because I saw myself in his eyes that night. I saw the years of companionship, the countless laughs, the tears shed behind curtains, the fights and reconciliations, the way he looked at me when I pushed too hard, when I punished myself more than any critic ever could. He had been my anchor without me even realizing it. And I'd been too busy running toward the future to stop and honor the present. As dawn broke outside my window the next morning, I asked myself the hardest questions. Had I mistaken achievement for meaning? Had I confused applause with love? Was I missing out on the very moments that would matter most at the end of my life? That was the beginning of my breakdown. Not the kind that happens once and is over, but the kind that unfolds over weeks, months, years. A slow crumbling of illusions, a re-evaluation of everything I thought was important. Jimin's answer wasn't just an observation. It was an invitation to stop, to breathe, to be present, to discover what it truly means to be someone's soulmate and to let someone be mine. And in that invitation, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. Maybe I had already found what I was looking for. The morning after that question was asked to Jimin, I remember sitting alone with a cup of coffee that had already turned cold by the time I realized I hadn't even taken a sip. I was staring out the window of my apartment, watching the faint glow of sunrise paint the city, but my mind was far from the beauty outside. It was trapped inside a single sentence Jimin had spoken. A soulmate is not always about romance. It's about who makes you feel at home even when the world feels heavy. Those words lingered like an echo, not fading, but growing louder with every passing hour, and I couldn't escape the weight of them. I thought back to the years we had spent together. Years of rehearsals, endless nights in practice rooms, tours across continents, hotel rooms that felt like cages, and the moments in between that most people never saw. If I asked myself honestly, who was always there to remind me that I didn't have to carry everything alone, the answer was undeniable. It was Jimin. Yet, admitting that to myself was terrifying, because to call someone your soulmate, even silently, is to admit vulnerability. It is to admit that beneath all the armor, all the tattoos, all the music and performance and discipline, there is a boy inside me who simply doesn't want to be alone. For years, I had convinced myself that strength was independence, that love was a distraction, that being untouchable was the only way to survive in this industry. But the truth is, being untouchable only left me untouched, and untouched meant unloved. I remember walking into the studio later that day, still tired from the sleepless night. The room smelled of coffee and equipment, cables scattered across the floor, instruments waiting in silence. Jimin was already there, humming softly to himself as he scrolled through some lyrics. He looked up and smiled at me, a smile so normal, so familiar, that it hurt. How could he act as if nothing had happened? Didn't he know that his words from last night had turned my world upside down? I wanted to ask him, what did you mean? Were you talking about me? Were you saying that you are my soulmate, or that I should look elsewhere? But the words got stuck in my throat. Instead, I sat down across from him, pretending to focus on the notes in front of me, my hands trembling slightly as I turned the pages. That was the first time I realized how fragile presence is. You can be sitting right next to someone, breathing the same air, sharing the same silence, and still be miles apart inside. And yet, paradoxically, you can also be apart physically on different sides of the world and still feel them closer to you than anyone else. That contradiction haunted me for weeks. The industry doesn't make it easy to think about things like soulmates. Everything is scheduled, optimized, directed. Our time is cut into segments. 3 minutes for this, 10 minutes for that. An hour here, a flight there. We're praised for efficiency, for perfection, for productivity. But when Jimin spoke those words, I realized how little space I had given myself for reflection. I had filled my calendar so completely that there was no room left to simply exist. No room left to ask, who am I when the lights are off? Who am I when I'm not Jungkook the performer, but just Jungkook the person? And in those rare moments when I dared to ask, the answer was always intertwined with him. Jimin, the one who noticed when I was too tired to speak. Jimin, who gave me silence without judgment when I didn't want to perform, even in front of friends. Jimin, who reminded me to eat when I was too focused on getting the choreography perfect. Jimin, who teased me when I was too hard on myself, pulling me back from the edge of self-destruction with nothing but laughter. I began to think about memories I hadn't visited in years. Like the time we shared a late night walk in a foreign city, our masks pulled up, hoods covering most of our faces. Nobody recognized us, and for once, the world felt quiet. We talked about nothing important, just the lights, the streets, the smell of food from corner stalls. And yet, that night remains etched in my mind more vividly than some of the biggest performances of my career. Because for once, I wasn't Jungkook the idol. I was Jungkook the boy, walking beside his friend, breathing in freedom. Wasn't that what Jimin meant? That a soulmate is the person who gives you back your humanity when the world tries to strip it away. That thought both comforted me and terrified me. Because if that was true, then I had already found mine. And what if I lost him? What if fame, distance, misunderstandings, or the relentless march of time pulled us apart? Would I be left hollow, chasing achievements that suddenly meant nothing? One evening, weeks after that question was asked, I found myself back at the dorm. Everyone else had already gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The silence pressed in on me. I grabbed my guitar, sat on the floor, and let my fingers wander across the strings. The melody that emerged was soft, uncertain, almost like a confession I couldn't voice. I found myself singing about connection, about fear, about longing, and before I knew it, the words spilling out were about him, about Jimin. I stopped mid-song, my heart pounding. Was this the truth I had been avoiding? That every lyric, every sketch of melody that felt raw and honest somehow led back to him. I closed my eyes and felt tears I didn't even know I'd been holding back slide down my face. And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't just afraid of losing him. I was afraid of admitting how much he had already become a part of me. The next day, during rehearsal, I caught myself watching him. Not in the obvious way, not with lingering stares, but in small details. The way he adjusted his sleeve before a move, the way his hair fell into his eyes, the way he smiled faintly when he thought no one was watching. Each detail carved deeper into me the truth I had been resisting. He wasn't just my friend, he wasn't just my brother, he was the person who made me feel at home in a life that so often felt like exile. But here's the paradox. The closer I felt to acknowledging this, the more I pulled away. I buried myself in practice, in projects, in distractions, because naming something as sacred as a soulmate felt like putting it at risk. If I admitted it, would it break? If I spoke it aloud, would it vanish? So I stayed silent, even as my heart screamed. I let Jimin's words from that night live inside me like an unanswered letter. And every day, the letter grew heavier. Every time I saw him laugh, every time I saw him tired, every time I saw him look at me with that quiet knowing, I wanted to ask, did you mean yourself? Were you trying to tell me without telling me? The weeks turned into months, but the question never left. In fact, it grew louder. And I realized that silence doesn't protect you, it only prolongs the ache. My breakdown wasn't a single explosion of tears. It was the slow erosion of defenses, the constant weight of unspoken truth pressing against the walls I had built around my heart. I began to notice how differently I viewed time. Before, I saw time as a resource, something to maximize, something to fill with productivity. But after Jimin's words, I started to see time as fragile, fleeting, sacred. I thought of Joseph from Must's story, the way he lost his wife, and realized too late that presence mattered more than achievement. I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to wake up one day and realize that I had missed every moment that truly mattered because I was too busy chasing things that ultimately didn't. So I began to ask myself new questions. Am I present when I'm with Jimin, or am I distracted thinking about the next rehearsal, the next album, the next stage? Am I giving him my full attention when he speaks, or am I just half listening, waiting for my turn to talk? Am I building memories or just passing through them? The answers disturb me. Too often, I realize I wasn't really there. Too often, I was physically present but mentally absent, lost in plans and pressures. And that realization broke me more than anything else. Because if Jimin truly was my soulmate, not in some romanticized, cinematic sense, but in the deepest, truest sense, then what was I doing with that gift? Was I honoring it, or was I neglecting it without even knowing? That night, I made a promise to myself. I didn't say it aloud, but I felt it deep inside. I would start showing up fully, not just for him, but for myself, for every person and every moment that mattered. I didn't know where that promise would lead me. I didn't know if it would ever be enough to express what I felt, but I knew I couldn't go back to living the way I had been living, rushing, optimizing, achieving, but never truly being alive. And so began a new chapter, one not defined by charts or records, but by questions of the heart. Questions I was still too afraid to ask aloud, but ones I carried with me every day. Questions that would continue to shape me in ways I could never have predicted. Because once you've been confronted with the truth of a soulmate, silence is no longer peace. It is torment. And I was only beginning to learn how deep that torment could go. There is a moment, often too fleeting to notice, when your heart recognizes something before your mind dares to admit it. For me, that moment repeated itself in the smallest, most ordinary gestures. It wasn't in the grand stages of concerts, or the roaring sound of arenas filled with armies, or the bright cameras capturing every smile. It was in the quiet, almost invisible details. Details that kept haunting me after that night Jimin was asked about my soulmate. It began in rehearsal. Normally, my eyes were locked on the mirror, on the angles of my arms, the precision of my steps, the control of my breath. But lately, I found myself watching him instead. Not in a way anyone else would notice, but in fragments how he tied his shoelaces twice before dancing, how his shoulders relaxed only after the first run-through, how he would adjust his mic pack carefully, as if it were part of his body. They were meaningless to others, but to me they became evidence. Evidence that my attention was shifting, that my soul was drawn to him in ways I could not disguise, not even from myself. One afternoon, as we practiced endlessly for an upcoming performance, Jimin noticed my exhaustion before I said a word. He tossed me a bottle of water without even looking, his eyes still fixed on his own reflection in the mirror. "Drink," he said softly, almost absent-mindedly. It should have been nothing, just a simple gesture. But my hands trembled as I caught the bottle, because in that one word drink, I felt seen. Not as Jungkook the performer, not as the man pushing himself beyond limits, but as Jungkook the human, the boy who sometimes forgot to care for himself. That night, when I lay in bed, I asked myself, isn't this what a soulmate is? Someone who sees you without you having to explain. Someone who notices the cracks in your armor, the fatigue in your bones, the shadows under your eyes, and gently reminds you that you are more than the role you play. But with that realization came fear. Fear that I would ruin everything by admitting too much. Fear that I would scare him away. Fear that by naming him my soulmate, I would place a weight on our bond that he never asked to carry. So I stayed silent, keeping the truth like a fragile secret pressed between the pages of my heart. Yet, silence has a way of amplifying what it tries to suppress. The more I tried to bury my feelings, the louder they grew. I started noticing more. The way he laughed when he was truly amused, not the polite laughter he gave cameras. The way his hand lingered on my shoulder a little longer than necessary after a tough performance. The way his eyes softened when he looked at me, like he was trying to say something without words. Each detail cut deeper, reminding me of the unspoken truth I carried. Then came a night that shook me in a way I hadn't anticipated. We were on tour, miles away from home, in a city where the streets felt unfamiliar, and the nights stretched endlessly. After the show, we returned to the hotel, the adrenaline slowly fading from our veins. Most of the others retired quickly, exhausted. But Jimin and I lingered in the hallway, neither of us eager to be alone yet. "Walk with me," he said. And so we did. No disguise, no entourage, just two friends slipping into the night. We walked aimlessly, our steps echoing against the quiet streets. For once, the world felt still. We ended up by the riverside, the city lights reflecting in the water. Jimin leaned against the railing, his eyes fixed on the rippling surface. I stood beside him, hands shoved into my pockets, heart racing for reasons I couldn't explain. After a long silence, he spoke. You know, sometimes I think about what people really mean when they say the word soulmate. My chest tightened. The word again. That word that had been haunting me since that night. What do you think it means? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He shrugged, still watching the water. I think it's the person who reminds you of yourself, but also makes you better than yourself. The person you don't have to pretend with. The one who sees the parts of you that even you try to hide. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because every word he spoke was a mirror held up to my own heart. And in that silence, my soul screamed the truth. I couldn't voice. It's you. It has always been you. That night, I lay awake in my hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, tears silently slipping down my face. I thought about the thousands of fans who called me their soulmate, their light, their reason to keep going. I thought about the songs I sang, the messages I wrote, the love I received from the world. And yet, none of it mattered in that moment, because the only voice I wanted to hear calling me soulmate was his. The following weeks were a blur of performances and interviews, but beneath it all, a storm brewed inside me. Every time Jimin smiled at me, I wondered, does he know? Does he feel it too? Or am I just projecting, reading into things that are nothing more than kindness from a friend? The doubt consumed me. I would laugh with him during the day and cry alone at night, torn between gratitude and longing. It became harder to hide. During one fan event, someone asked me, Jungkook, what do you think a soulmate is? My mind froze. The audience laughed, waiting for a playful answer. I forced a smile, said something light, something forgettable. But inside, my heart was in chaos. I wanted to scream his name. I wanted to look at Jimin and let the whole world know. But instead, I swallowed the truth, tasting the bitterness of my own silence. Silence became my shield, but it also became my prison. I found myself withdrawing, afraid of being too obvious. I laughed less. I joked less. I buried myself in practice, in music, in anything that could distract me from the ache. But Jimin noticed. He always noticed. One evening, after rehearsal, he pulled me aside. Are you okay? He asked softly, his eyes searching mine. I nodded quickly, too quickly. Just tired. But he didn't look convinced. He held my gaze a moment longer, and in his eyes I saw something I couldn't name. Concern? Understanding? Or was it the very same longing I had been carrying? The possibility scared me more than the silence itself. Because if he felt it too, what then? What would it mean for us, for the group, for the world that watched our every move? Could we risk everything for something as fragile, as uncertain, as love? The thought tore me apart. I wanted to run to him, to confess, to finally breathe free. But I also wanted to protect him, to protect us, to keep safe the bond that had carried us through so much already. And so I stayed silent, choosing torment over risk. But the truth has a way of demanding to be faced. And deep inside, I knew I couldn't hide forever. The question that broke me when asked to Jimin had now become the question that defined me. Who is Jungkook's soulmate? And I knew the answer, even if I couldn't say it. It was written in every look, every laugh, every silence we shared. It was Jimin. It had always been Jimin. What I didn't know yet was how that truth would eventually demand to be spoken, no matter how much I tried to hold it inside. The question I had been running from did not stay hidden for long. The world has a way of finding cracks in your armor and pressing against them until they break. After Jimin's answer about soulmates, I thought maybe it would fade into the background, just another moment among countless interviews and casual questions. But it didn't. Instead, it grew louder, repeated back to me in headlines, in fan theories, in whispers I could never quite silence. One morning, as I scrolled through articles on my phone, the words leapt out. Jimin's cryptic answer about Jungkook's soulmate sparks debate among fans. The article dissected every syllable of his response, every pause, every glance between us. Fans posted threads speculating what he truly meant. Some convinced it was about me, others insisting it was about someone unseen. The theories spread like wildfire, and suddenly, what had been an intimate moment between us was now dissected under a microscope for the world to consume. I should have been used to this. After all, my entire life had been lived in front of cameras, my every move analyzed, praised, or criticized. But this was different. This wasn't about choreography or vocals. or fashion. This was about the most fragile truth in my heart, the truth I hadn't even admitted aloud. And now it was out there, twisted into speculation and noise. The pressure weighed on me. Every interview after that seemed to circle back to the idea of love, connection, destiny. Reporters phrased it differently, but the undertone was always the same. Who is Jungkook's soulmate? And each time I laughed, deflected, changed the subject. But every deflection felt like a knife against my own chest, cutting deeper into the silence I carried. Hybe noticed too. They always notice. One afternoon, I was called into a quiet meeting. The manager leaned across the table, his expression careful. Jungkook, you know the soulmate talk is trending again. We need to be careful. Fans are invested, but the media can twist it. Just keep it professional. Don't let it get out of hand. I nodded, but inside I was screaming. Professional. Keep it professional. How do you stay professional about something that feels like the essence of your existence? How do you draw clean lines when your soul itself refuses to obey them? I left that meeting with a knot in my chest, one that grew tighter every day. The irony was unbearable. The more the world speculated, the less I could say. The truth was trapped inside me, suffocating, while the noise outside only grew louder. And through it all, Jimin remained the quiet center of my storm. He never brought it up, never teased, never pressured me. He just stayed close, the same as always. But his silence was almost harder to bear than any question, because I didn't know what it meant. Was he protecting me? Was he waiting for me to speak? Or was he silently telling me that this bond was never meant to be named? One night, after a particularly grueling day of rehearsals and press, I found myself standing on the rooftop of the Hybe building. The city stretched out before me, glittering with endless lights, but I felt more alone than I ever had in a crowd of thousands. I leaned against the railing, my breath fogging in the cool air, and for the first time, I let the tears fall freely. I thought about Joseph from that other story, the man who realized too late what truly mattered. Was I heading down the same path? Achieving everything, admired by millions, but missing the one truth that would give it all meaning? What would it matter if I broke records? If I filled stadiums? If I gave my entire youth to music? If, in the end, I lost the one person who felt like home? As the wind cut across the rooftop, I whispered a confession to the night, knowing no one could hear me. It's you, Jimin. It has always been you. My voice cracked, my chest heaved, but once the words left me, I felt both lighter and more terrified than ever. The days that followed blurred together. Concerts, flights, interviews on the surface, everything was the same. But inside me, the storm raged louder. Every time I looked at him, every time our shoulders brushed, every time his laughter filled the room, I wanted to scream the truth. But I stayed silent, imprisoned by fear. Until one evening, the silence broke in a way I hadn't expected. We were filming a variety segment, the kind filled with playful questions and laughter. The host grinned mischievously and asked, Jungkook, if you had to choose one member to spend the rest of your life with, who would it be? No. The room erupted in laughter, the members teasing, the fans screaming through the monitors. I smiled nervously, trying to play it off, but my mind froze. My eyes flickered to Jimin before I could stop myself. It was just a second, a fleeting glance, but I knew the cameras had caught it. I knew he had felt it. I gave a safe answer. Something funny, something forgettable. But the damage was done. Later that night, alone in my hotel room, I saw the clips already circulating online. Did you see the way Jungkook looked at Jimin? That wasn't just a glance. There's something there. My phone buzzed endlessly with messages, notifications, theories, and I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding with equal parts fear and relief, because maybe, just maybe, the truth was no longer mine to bury. But relief quickly gave way to dread. I thought about the consequences, the headlines, the scrutiny, the possible backlash. Was I ready for that? Was Jimin? Could our bond survive being pulled apart by the world's hands? I turned off my phone, buried my face in my hands, and whispered into the darkness. I can't keep hiding, but I don't know how to be brave enough to tell him. The silence of that hotel room pressed in on me, heavy and unrelenting. I realized then that the question wasn't just about who my soulmate was. It was about whether I had the courage to claim him, to stand in the truth, even if it cost me everything else. And deep inside, I knew the storm was only just beginning. The storm I had been holding back finally demanded to be faced. It was no longer just an internal struggle, no longer something I could suppress with practice, music, or silence. Every day, the tension between what I felt and what I said grew heavier, until it pressed against me like a weight I could no longer carry. It happened on a night that felt strangely ordinary. We had just finished a long rehearsal, the kind where sweat clings to your skin like a second layer, where every muscle aches, but the adrenaline still hums through your veins. The others drifted out one by one, mumbling goodnights, their exhaustion too heavy to linger. Soon, it was just Jimin and me, sitting on the studio floor with our backs against the mirror. The room smelled of dust and wood polish, the faint hum of the air conditioning filling the silence. My chest rose and fell in uneven breaths, my shirt damp with sweat. He sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed lightly, his own breath still ragged from the hours of movement. For a long while, neither of us spoke, and yet the silence wasn't empty. It was thick, heavy, filled with everything unsaid. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my own tired eyes, the tattoos on my arm, the boy who had grown into a man under relentless lights. And beside me, Jimin's reflection sat just as still, his gaze lowered, his lips slightly parted as if he too was carrying words he couldn't release. "Jungkook," he said quietly, breaking the silence. My heart leapt at the sound of my name in his voice, softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Yeah?" I answered, my throat dry. He didn't look at me. Instead, he kept his eyes on the floor. "Are you okay?" It was such a simple question. One he had asked me countless times before, but this time, it cracked something inside me. Because I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay for months, maybe years, and I was so tired of pretending. I swallowed hard, fighting the instinct to lie. "No," I whispered finally. His head turned, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. "What's wrong?" he asked softly, his brows furrowing with concern. I opened my mouth, but the words tangled in my chest. How do you tell someone that they are the reason and the remedy for your pain? How do you confess that their existence both saves you and terrifies you? My lips trembled, but no sound came out. Jimin didn't push. He just waited, his gaze steady, patient. And in that patience, I felt the tears well up in my eyes. "I can't keep carrying this," I whispered finally, my voice breaking. "I feel like I'm drowning." He shifted closer, his hand brushing against mine, a silent gesture of reassurance. "Carrying what?" he asked gently. My chest ached, my throat burned, and before I could stop myself, the truth slipped out, raw and trembling. "You." The word hung in the air between us, fragile and dangerous. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might break free from my chest. Jimin's eyes widened slightly, his lips parting as if he wasn't sure he had heard me correctly. I rushed to explain, my words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Not in a bad way. It's just ever since that night, when they asked you about my soulmate, I can't stop thinking about it, about what you said, about what it means. And I realized that I don't know how to exist without you anymore. You're the only person who makes me feel like home. Like I don't have to be perfect. Like I don't have to be anything but myself. And it scares me because maybe that means you're my soulmate. Maybe you always have been. The silence that followed was unbearable. I wanted to take the words back, to bury them, to run, but I couldn't. They were out now, exposed, vulnerable, irreversible. Jimin's eyes softened, a flicker of something I couldn't name crossing his face. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached up and wiped the tears from my cheek with the back of his hand, his touch, gentle, grounding. "Do you know why I said what I said that night?" he asked finally. His voice was calm, steady, but there was something in it, something deeper. I shook my head, unable to speak. "Because I saw myself in you," he said. "All those years I spent chasing perfection, breaking myself to meet expectations, measuring my worth by what I achieved. I saw you doing the same. And I didn't want you to make the same mistake I did. I wanted you to know that love, connection, presence, that's what matters. That's what will save you." His words pierced me, deeper than any applause, deeper than any critique. Because in them, I heard not just wisdom, but love. A love that had been there all along, quiet but steady, like the river beneath the city lights. My tears fell freely now, unstoppable. So what does that make us? I asked, my voice barely audible. Jimin smiled faintly, though his eyes glistened. It makes us exactly what we are. Soulmates, maybe. Brothers, maybe. Something beyond either word. But whatever it is, it's ours. And that's enough. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let his words wrap around me, like armor. But a part of me still trembled, afraid of what the world would say, afraid of what we might lose if this truth ever came to light. That night, after he left the studio, I stayed behind, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was streaked with tears, my eyes red and swollen. But for the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. Not because the weight was gone, but because I had finally shared it. As I sat there, alone in the silence, I realized something profound. Soulmates are not defined by labels or appearances. They are defined by presence, by the moments when the world falls away and you are left with nothing but truth. And my truth was clear. Jimin was my home, my anchor, my soulmate. The question now was not whether he felt the same. I knew he did in his own way. The question was whether I was brave enough to live that truth, no matter the cost. Because the cost would be high. The world would dissect us, question us, twist us. Hype would worry about the image, the brand, the future. Fans would speculate, some would celebrate, others would turn away. And through it all, we would be tested in ways I couldn't even imagine. But as I walked out of the studio that night, the city lights blurring through my tears, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not run from this anymore. I would not bury the truth that had already shaped my soul. Whatever storm awaited, I would face it with him. Because if there is one thing I knew with absolute certainty, it was this. The world could take away stages, records, even years of my youth, but it could never take away the bond I shared with Jimin. And if that bond was what people called a soulmate, then I was ready to claim it, consequences and all. The night I confessed to Jimin in that quiet studio did not end with fireworks, nor with a dramatic declaration that changed everything instantly. Instead, it ended with silence. The kind of silence that carried more weight than words ever could. I left the building feeling both lighter and heavier at once. Lighter because the truth was no longer buried inside me. Heavier because now it existed between us, alive and undeniable. The days that followed were strange. On the surface, nothing changed. We still rehearsed side by side, laughed in group chats, shared meals, and traveled together. But beneath it all, there was a subtle shift. The air between us felt charged, delicate, like a string stretched too tight. I caught myself watching him more, not with the nervous tension of before, but with the awareness that he knew. He knew what I felt, and he hadn't turned away. That alone gave me a fragile kind of peace. But peace did not last long. The world has a way of intruding on private truths. Rumors about soulmates continued to spread online, fueled by fan edits, interviews, and fleeting glances that cameras always seem to catch. Every time Jimin and I shared a look or a laugh, the internet exploded with theories. Some were harmless, playful, others were invasive, dissecting us with a precision that felt like violation. I tried to ignore it, to brush it off as the inevitable noise of fame, but I could feel the walls closing in. During one rehearsal break, our manager pulled me aside. His tone was sharp but quiet. "Jungkook, you need to be careful. The fans are picking up on things. You and Jimin people are starting to talk too much. We can't afford a scandal right now." The word scandal stung. How could love, or even the possibility of it, be reduced to something shameful, something dangerous? I wanted to argue, to shout that what I felt was not a scandal, but the most honest thing I had ever known. But I stayed silent, nodding mechanically, my throat tight with frustration. That night, I found myself back on the rooftop again, the city stretching endlessly below. The lights blurred through my tears as I whispered into the wind. Why does the world make it so hard to love honestly? My voice cracked, the question dissolving into the night unanswered. When I returned to the dorm, Jimin was waiting in the living room. He sat on the couch, his phone abandoned beside him, his eyes fixed on me as I walked in. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he patted the seat next to him. I sat down, my chest heavy. The silence between us was different this time, not tense, but expectant. "I know what they said to you," he murmured finally. I looked at him, startled. "How?" He smiled, faintly, without humor. "I know how this world works. They said the same to me." His words hit me like a punch. I stared at him, my hands clenched in my lap. "What did you tell them?" "That there's nothing to worry about," he replied softly. "That whatever bond we share, it doesn't need to be explained to anyone else." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. But what if they're right? What if it does become a problem? For the group, for the fans, for us? Jimin turned toward me, his gaze steady. "Then we'll face it, together." The simplicity of his answer unraveled me. I felt tears welling up again, and I turned away, ashamed of my own fragility. But he reached out, his hand covering mine, grounding me. "Jungkook," he said quietly, "do you know what I think a soulmate really is? It's the person who gives you courage you don't have on your own. That's what you've always been for me. And maybe that's what I can be for you too." His words broke something open inside me. For so long, I had believed that strength meant carrying everything alone. But in that moment, I realized true strength was letting someone carry it with you. We sat there for a long time, our hands intertwined, the silence no longer heavy but comforting. The storm outside still raged. Rumors, pressures, expectations, but inside that small space, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. Yet, calm does not mean easy. The following weeks tested us in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every interview felt like a minefield. Every casual question about love or relationships made my heart race, afraid that the truth would slip out. Every time the fans cheered for us together, I felt both warmth and fear, torn between gratitude for their love and terror of what might happen if they knew too much. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had been selfish. Was it fair to Jimin to drag him into this? Was it fair to risk the group, the career we had built, the millions who believed in us? One night, unable to bear the weight of those questions, I knocked on his door. He opened it, sleepy-eyed but smiling, and let me in without hesitation. "I can't do this," I blurted out, pacing his room. "I can't keep pretending everything's normal. I feel like I'm going to explode." He watched me silently, his expression calm. When I finally stopped pacing, he stood and walked over, placing his hands gently on my shoulders. "Then don't pretend," he said softly. "Not with me. Out there, maybe we still have to. But in here, in this space, you don't have to pretend." The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable. I buried my face against his shoulder, my body shaking with the force of everything I had been holding back. And he held me, saying nothing, just being there, fully there, presence in the way only he could be. That night, for the first time, I slept without fear, because I knew that no matter what storm awaited us outside, inside these walls, I had him, and that was enough to keep me going. Still, as the days passed, I couldn't ignore the truth. This wasn't a battle we could fight in private forever. The world would keep asking questions. The pressure would only grow. And one day, we would have to decide how much of ourselves we were willing to share and how much we were willing to risk. But for now, in that fragile present, I chose to hold on to him, to honor the bond we shared, not with grand declarations, but with the simple, quiet moments that no camera could capture. Because in the end, that's what being soulmates meant. Not perfection, not spectacle, not answers for the world, just presence, just truth, just us. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. There is a difference between carrying a secret and carrying a truth. A secret feels like something you hide, something that loses its power once spoken. But a truth, it lives, it breathes, it demands to be honored whether you're ready or not. By the time weeks had passed since that night with Jimin, I realized I was no longer carrying a secret. I was carrying a truth. And that truth was starting to shape not only my heart, but the world around me. The whispers online had turned into conversations. Fans began creating compilations of moments between me and Jimin, analyzing glances, words, body language. Some celebrated it, calling it destiny, calling us soulmates without hesitation. Others criticized, warning that such closeness was dangerous, that it threatened the group, that it crossed boundaries. The noise was constant, and I felt torn in half. One evening, as we were leaving a recording session, I overheard two staff members speaking in hushed tones. They didn't see me standing behind the half-open door. Do you think it's true? About Jungkook and Jimin? One whispered. The other side. Who knows? But if it is, they need to be careful. This industry doesn't forgive easily. Fans say they love love, but the truth is, sometimes they love control more. Their words chilled me. Control. Was that what this was about? Not whether love was real, but whether it fit the script people had written for us. That night, I went home heavy with anger and fear. I sat on my bed, my phone glowing in my hand as I scrolled through endless posts. Look at the way he looks at him. Did you see how they sat together? This can't just be friendship. It was surreal, our most private moments dissected like puzzles for strangers to solve. I threw the phone onto the bed and buried my face in my hands. I wanted to scream, to tell the world to stop treating my heart like entertainment, but I didn't, because I knew that if I shouted the truth, it would be like throwing gasoline onto an already raging fire. Instead, I found myself thinking about my family. I thought about my mother's gentle eyes, my father's steady presence, my brother's quiet support. What would they think if they knew? Would they see it as weakness? Would they worry about the consequences more than they celebrated the love? Or would they understand that this was not about scandal or headlines, but about survival, my survival? I couldn't carry the question alone any longer. So one weekend, when schedules briefly allowed, I visited home. The house smelled the same as always. Warm meals, clean laundry, a trace of old wood. My mother hugged me tight, as if she could sense the weight I carried. That evening, as we sat around the table, I found myself blurting it out before I lost my courage. Mom, Dad, do you believe in soulmates? They looked at me, surprised by the suddenness of the question. My father tilted his head, thoughtful. I believe some people come into our lives to change us forever. You can call that a soulmate if you want. My mother smiled gently. Why do you ask? I hesitated, my heart pounding, because I think I found mine, and it's not what people would expect. Silence followed, thick and heavy. My mother reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. Jungkook, love is not about what people expect. It's about what makes you whole. If you found someone who makes you feel like yourself, someone who makes you better, then that's a gift. Don't let fear steal it from you. Tears burned my eyes as I nodded, unable to speak. My father leaned forward, his gaze steady. But remember, gifts often come with responsibility. If you choose to protect this bond, you must be ready for the cost. The world can be harsh, but if it's real, if it's true, you'll endure. Their words stayed with me, both comforting and daunting. I left home with my heart a little lighter, but my mind buzzing with the gravity of their reminder. Love demands courage. Back in Seoul, the storm only grew. During a fan meeting, a fan handed Jimin a card that said, "You are Jungkook's soulmate, right?" He laughed softly, brushed it off with his usual charm, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, a flicker only I could read. Later that night, when we were alone, I asked him about it. "How do you do it?" I whispered. "How do you laugh when they ask questions like that?" He looked at me with quiet sadness, because if I don't laugh, I'll cry. His honesty broke me. I pulled him into an embrace, holding him tighter than I ever had before. "I don't want you to carry this pain," I whispered against his shoulder. He pulled back slightly, his eyes glistening. "And I don't want you to carry it alone either. That's what soulmates do, remember? We carry each other." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the truth I had been avoiding. This bond wasn't just about love or longing. It was about survival. About having someone who anchored me when the world threatened to sweep me away. About being that anchor for him in return. But survival alone wasn't enough. We couldn't keep hiding in shadows, pretending the storm outside wasn't real. We needed to decide who we wanted to be, not just for ourselves, but for each other. And so, a new question began to haunt me, heavier than the first. Not, who is my soulmate? I already knew that answer. The real question was, am I brave enough to stand beside him in the light, no matter the cost? The truth of a soulmate is never simple. It sounds poetic when whispered in songs, beautiful when written in fan letters, comforting when imagined in fantasies. But in reality, it is heavy. It asks something of you. It asks whether you are willing to pay the price for living honestly. By the time the whispers around me and Jimin had turned into open conversations, I realized that our bond was no longer just ours. The world had claimed a piece of it, and the only choice left was whether to deny or defend it. The tension reached its breaking point during a live broadcast. We were all sitting together, laughing, answering questions. It was light-hearted, playful, until a fan's comment flashed on the screen. "Jungkook, be honest, is Jimin your soulmate?" The room erupted in laughter, the members teasing, the staff chuckling nervously off camera. I forced a smile, my throat dry, my heart slamming against my ribs. I answered with a practiced laugh, something vague and safe. "My soulmate is Army," the fans screamed, satisfied with the performance. But inside I felt like a coward, because in that moment I had betrayed the truth living inside me. After the broadcast, I slipped away, hiding in the empty stairwell of the building. My hands trembled as I pressed them against my face, the echo of my own laughter ringing hollow in my ears. I wanted to scream, to break something, to undo the moment. But all I could do was sit there, suffocating in my own silence. Jimin found me there. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me on the cold steps. The silence between us was thick, but not empty. Finally, he whispered, "You don't have to carry this war alone." I turned to him, my eyes burning. "But don't you see, every time I deny it, I feel like I'm cutting away a piece of myself. And every time I want to say it, I think of the cost. The group, the fans, the headlines, you. I don't know how to choose between protecting us and protecting you." He reached out, taking my trembling hand in his. "You've already chosen," he said softly. "By protecting me, you're protecting us. Don't you see? The truth doesn't have to be shouted to be real. Sometimes it's enough just to live it quietly, fully, in the spaces that belong only to us." His words soothed me, but they didn't erase the weight. Because deep down, I knew the world would never stop asking. Fans would never stop speculating. The company would never stop worrying. And I would never stop feeling torn between silence and truth. The breaking point came a week later. We were called into another meeting, the air heavy with tension. The higher-ups sat across from us, their expressions serious. "The soulmate narrative is getting out of hand," one of them said bluntly. "You two need to distance yourselves publicly. Less skinship, less attention, less moments. Do you understand?" The words hit me like ice water. Distance. They wanted me to cut off the very thing that kept me alive. I nodded mechanically, my chest burning with rage I couldn't show. Jimin stayed quiet, his expression unreadable, but I could feel the storm beneath his calm. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, their words echoing in my head. Distance. Less moments. As if love could be rationed, as if connection could be erased by pretending it didn't exist. My fist clenched against the sheets, tears burning my eyes. At dawn, I walked into the practice room, empty except for Jimin. He was sitting on the floor, earbuds in, lost in thought. When he saw me, he pulled them out, his gaze steady. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. I shook my head, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "They want us to distance, to pretend, to erase what we are." My voice cracked. "I can't do it, Jimin. I can't live like that. If loving you, if being tied to you is a scandal, then let it be. Because I'd rather burn with the truth than suffocate in a lie." His eyes widened, glistening with unshed tears. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, slowly, he reached out, cupping my face in his hands. "Do you know what you just did?" I blinked at him, confused. "What?" "You chose," he whispered. "You chose me. Not the fans, not the company, not the world. Me." The tears I had been holding back spilled freely, my body shaking as I leaned into his touch. For the first time, I felt the fear loosen its grip on me. Because he was right. I had chosen. And once chosen, the truth no longer needed permission to exist. That evening, as we walked out of the building together, I felt a strange calm. The storm outside was still raging, rumors, whispers, scrutiny, but inside I had clarity. The question was no longer whether Jimin was my soulmate. That had been answered long ago. The question now was whether I was willing to fight for it. As the city lights flickered around us, I looked at him, my chest swelling with both fear and love. "Whatever happens," I whispered, "we face it together." He smiled faintly, his hand brushing against mine as we walked. "Together," he echoed. And in that single word, I found the strength I had been searching for all along. The decision to stand with Jimin, no matter the cost, gave me a strange kind of peace. But peace, I would soon learn, does not mean safety. Once you make a choice like that, the world reacts. And it rarely reacts gently. It began with subtle shifts in the way people looked at us. During interviews, I noticed the way hosts lingered on their questions about love. I saw how journalists smirked when they mentioned the word soulmate. I felt the way the air in the room grew heavier whenever Jimin and I sat too close, laughed too freely, looked at each other for too long. It was as if the world had been waiting for us to slip, and now every glance became evidence, every silence became fuel. One morning, as I scrolled through the endless stream of headlines, my chest tightened. Fans divided. Is Jungkook's soulmate closer than we think? Body language experts analyze Jungkook and Jimin's interactions. Hype faces pressure as soulmate narrative spirals. My name, our bond, reduced to speculation and entertainment. I threw my phone onto the couch, pressing my palms against my eyes as if I could block it all out. But I couldn't block out the conversations happening around me. Some fans defended us fiercely, flooding timelines with messages of love and acceptance. Others lashed out, their words sharp, accusing, filled with betrayal. We didn't sign up for this. He's ruining everything. Keep it professional. The duality was dizzying love and hate colliding in waves I couldn't control. The company grew restless. Another meeting, another warning. Keep it subtle. Think of the brand. Don't give them more reason to speculate. Their words felt like shackles, tightening around the truth I had already promised myself I wouldn't deny. I left the room feeling suffocated, my fists clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. That night, I sat on the dorm balcony, staring out at the city lights, my heart heavy. Jimin joined me quietly, sitting beside me without a word. We watched the cars move below, the endless flow of people, the hum of a world that would never stop demanding something from us. Are you scared? I asked finally, my voice breaking the silence. He turned to me, his profile illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlights. Of course, he admitted, but I'm more scared of a life where we keep denying who we are. I've lived that life before, Jungkook. I can't do it again. His honesty was both comforting and terrifying. I leaned back, closing my eyes, the weight of his words sinking into me. He had carried his own battles, his own scars, long before this moment. And yet, here he was, choosing to stand beside me anyway. The true test came during a press event. We sat on stage, lights blinding, cameras clicking relentlessly. Questions flew one after another, routine, predictable, until a reporter leaned forward, her voice sharp with curiosity. Jungkook, you've been asked many times about soulmates. The fans are wondering, do you believe you've already found yours? The room fell silent. My chest tightened, my palms damp with sweat. I felt every eye in the room on me, every camera lens zooming in, every microphone waiting. I glanced at Jimin instinctively. His gaze met mine, steady, unwavering. In that single look, I felt everything. The years of friendship, the nights of laughter, the tears we had shared, the quiet moments that belonged only to us. I could have lied. I could have given the safe answer, the rehearsed line. My soulmate is Army. The crowd would have cheered, the headlines would have spun it into something clean, something profitable. But as I opened my mouth, I knew I couldn't do it again, not after everything. I believe I have, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. And I believe a soulmate isn't about romance or expectation. It's about the person who makes you feel like home. The one who reminds you that you don't have to carry everything alone. For me, I've already found that person. Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras flashed brighter. The air grew electric, charged with the weight of my words. I didn't name him. I didn't have to. Anyone who had been watching us closely already knew. The press conference ended in chaos. Reporters shouting questions, staff rushing us off stage, managers scolding in hushed, frantic tones. But I barely heard any of it. My mind was still replaying the look on Jimin's face when I spoke. His eyes glistened, his lips pressed into the faintest of smiles, and in that look, I knew I had done the right thing. That night, back at the dorm, the silence between us was different. Not heavy, not fearful, but filled with something unspoken, yet undeniable. Jimin walked into my room without knocking, sat on the edge of my bed, and whispered, You didn't have to say that, but you did. I looked at him, my heart swelling, because I couldn't keep lying. Not about this, not about you. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against mine. For a long time, we stayed like that, breathing in the same rhythm, no words needed. And in that silence, I felt stronger than I ever had on stage, stronger than any record I had broken, stronger than any applause I had received, because this was real, this was ours. Of course, the storm outside only grew fiercer. Headlines exploded, fans argued, the company scrambled, but none of it mattered as much anymore, because for the first time I had spoken my truth. And no matter what the world chose to do with it, I knew I wouldn't regret it. The question was no longer whether I would stand in the truth. The question was how long the world would let us live it. When the storm finally reached its peak, I thought I would feel crushed beneath it. The headlines screamed louder than ever, the debates raged endlessly online, the company scrambled to contain the fallout. Everywhere I turned, there were questions, accusations, defenses, demands. The word soulmate became a weapon, a shield, a rumor, a dream. And through it all, one truth remained unshaken inside me. I had already found mine.